Everyone tells you that Tuscany is beautiful, and it is, but it can also drain your wallet. I've been there many times. In fact, 25 years ago we decided even to buy a small tiny property in the south of Tuscany. And today I'm gonna share with you all of my tips to experience the magic of Tuscany without blowing your budget. But let's dive straight away into it. The cheapest city to fly to in Tuscany is Pisa. That's where most of the low-cost airlines actually fly to for Tuscany. And believe it or not, today is actually twice as busy as the Florence airport, where typically there are more expensive airlines and less availability, which means the price of the tickets usually is a little bit higher. The third possibility is to fly to Rome, which works so well if you have an intercontinental flight, and you can rent the car in Rome where you have more availability and also better prices, and you can drive to the south of Tuscany in about 2 hours time. So you can start your trip with some hidden gems which I always suggest, like Pitigliano or Montemerano or the Saturnia Thermal Spas. These are all hidden gems that I talked about in one of my videos a few weeks ago. Staying in the historical center of Florence, Siena, Pisa is absolutely magic, but also costs an arm and a leg. If you want to save some money, I always say to stay a little bit outside of the historical center. For example, in Florence, I would suggest staying in Oltrarno or Campo Marte. The great thing about these two areas, for example, is that you will find mostly locals, especially in Campo Marte. You will eat as a local, which means also you're gonna spend less money. In Siena, we suggest staying in San Prospero, which is only 15 minutes from the cathedral and the main square, and there are other possibilities, for example in Pisa. For this reason I wrote 3 guides about the best areas to stay in the major destination of Tuscany, and I'm gonna put a link into the video description, and that's where you will find the cheapest options as well as some incredible value for money areas. I may be going against the current year, however I suggest renting a car, just a small economical car if you want to save some money. True, the cost of public transportation in Italy is quite cheap, but if you put all together the train, the buses, the local transportation system, you're gonna have a comparable price with a car, especially if you travel in 2 of you, and surely if you travel in 3 or more people. But besides that, you can also decide to stay in agriturismo, which are farmhouses maybe just outside of the main destinations, and visit this destination with day trips. This is gonna save you a ton of money because the cost of staying in agriturismo is a fraction of what you usually pay in the historical center, especially if you decide to add also the breakfast and the dinner in the agriturismo. They typically cook only fresh local source food, which is a great bonus beside the price. As I said previously, I've been visiting Tuscany for the last 25 years, and for the last 5 years I've been using a comparative website to find the best car rental company in Tuscany. I love this site because they rank every single car rental company between 5 and 10 stars based on the feedback of the customers like myself, and typically I filter between 8 and 10 stars, so I get listed only the most trusted companies, and then I just choose basically the cheapest option they have. On top of that, I typically also put a full insurance for 8 to 10 euros. Another suggestion I give you is to check on your credit card, because they may actually cover the full insurance on car rentals, and in this way you don't even have to pay for that. Avoid traveling in peak season, which is July and August. That's when the accommodation have the most expensive price, especially the first 2 weeks of August, absolutely to avoid. The cheapest time to visit Tuscany is obviously winter, but it can be quite cold, and also a few wineries will be closed. My favorite months to visit Tuscany are either May or September, October. May is obviously beautiful with the color of the nature, and you will have also mild temperature, which is ideal if you want to explore the medieval towns or the countryside. September, October is beautiful because this is the harvesting time, and in these 2 months there are plenty of sagre around. The sagre are basically festivals of the wine, of the chestnuts, of the wild boar. Stunning places where you're gonna mix mostly with local people. You will have the freshest food that you can find, and it's gonna be so economical as well. Just think half a liter of wine at 5 euros or a meal at 10-12 euros. You may already know that the typical breakfast in Italy is about cappuccino and maybe 1 or 2 pastries. and this is gonna cost you between 2.5 and 3 euros. But that may be more expensive if you sit in one of the tables of a cafe, especially if you are in the main squares of famous destinations like Siena and Florence. In fact, what you pay is the table service that can take the final price from 3 to 5 times as much as it is if you have this breakfast at the bar. So having breakfast standing by the bar is gonna definitely save you some money. This may not happen if you are in small villages or towns, especially if they are off a beaten path. My local cafe close to my small tiny property in Tuscany is actually a small pasticceria, a pastry shop, and I can have breakfast for 2.5 euros. I can sit at the table, enjoy the life passing by, and that's what I love of the off a beaten path destinations like the town where I have a house. And now, how can you save on food? Well, let me start by saying that usually the restaurants and the historical centers are the most expensive option you can find in Tuscany, and where you find the least value for money. Of course, there are still a few little gems, but that's the rule of thumb. The best way to save some money is eating in the agriturismo. These farmhouses are outside the main destinations, right in the countryside, most of the cases with spectacular views and only fresh food locally sourced. So you're gonna have the best of the best. And that's another good reason to rent a car, because you can have lunch and dinner in these places. Unfortunately, going with public transportation is not that easy. Having a pizza is also another option to save some money, but it's not really typical of Tuscany. Another possibility, if you are in an Airbnb, you can grab your food from a rosticceria and they cook only for takeaway. And finally, you can obviously cook yourself, and personally I find the best food usually in the local market. So if you are in a town or a village, just ask around, maybe your host, when is the morning they do the local markets, because that's where you find the freshest food at the best price. Another thing I should mention before closing this subject is that when you go to the restaurant, they always add a coperto, which is basically a service charge to cover everything about sitting at a table. You don't need to leave a tip unless obviously you find that the service has been exceptional. In that case, I highly suggest it. But if you do leave it, run the bill or leave 10-15 euros. Don't ask to add a percentage, because it's not something that is typical in Tuscany, unless obviously you are in very touristic restaurants. And now, how can you save on wine? Well, obviously Tuscany is so famous for the wine and you have so much choice. The cheapest wine typically in a restaurant is the house wine, which costs between 5 and 10 euros, and you can have it by carafa, which is basically a jug or half a jug of wine. Another tip I can give you is that the local wine from the town you are visiting, for example, is typically the cheapest you can find in the area. And the last thing is that they may offer you the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and you may think it comes from Montepulciano, Tuscany, but actually this wine is cheaper, yes, but it comes from another area, which is Abruzzo, in the center of Italy. It's still a good wine, it's cheaper, but it's not a Tuscan wine. Another thing I've been asked many times is about the 3-day museum. Some of the museums in Tuscany, they do offer a 3-day, and most of the time happens on the first Sunday of the month, but you should check the website. Is it a good save? Well, money-wise it's definitely a good save, but time-wise it's not. And that's because the queues are super long in these days. So if you are on a chilled out trip, that's absolutely fine, but if you are on a trip of 5 days or 7 days, I would personally not suggest to spend half a day just queuing up for the museum. Pre-book instead your tickets, so you're gonna jump the queue and go straight into the museum and you're gonna enjoy your holiday. One thing I lately done is to use ChatGPT actually as an audio guide. I just point my telephone and take a picture to a piece of art with a description maybe, and I ask ChatGPT to tell me more. And when I travel with my little one, which is 11 years old, I ask ChatGPT to adapt the description for an 11-year-old audience, making my visit much more interesting and entertaining for the family. Maybe with a few quiz at the end of the museum. And sometimes I build a full audio guide before actually going to the destination. If you are interested to know how to do it, just let me know in the comment and I will plan a video in future. If you are traveling from another country in Europe, I guess you have already a SIM card that works in Italy too, and it's part of a contract. Otherwise, buying a local SIM is probably not a good idea because the Italian SIM cards tend to be very expensive. What I usually do when I am in Italy, I just buy an eSIM and I browse around because there are so many operators and many times offering a last minute deal. And having an eSIM is so much more practical than just swapping all of the SIM cards. And what about the transportation within the city? Most of the destinations in Tuscany are walkable, so you don't really need to have public transportation, probably except only Florence, where you have three possibilities. The cheapest one is to use public transportation like tram and buses. The second option is to have a shared bicycle or scooter. And the third option, which is the most expensive, is to get a taxi. Just make sure when you jump on a taxi that they start the meter, because you don't want to be scammed with a very high price. And just to be sure, also ask what is going to be roughly the cost for your ride. Another suggestion I can give you is to take your water bottle with you, because there are so many fountains with drinkable water around. So you don't need to buy these plastic bottles, and honestly we have enough in Tuscany, as everywhere in the world, of plastic. If you forget your water bottle, just buy the first bottle with a nice durable plastic and use that bottle and refill it every time you see a fountain. Every city, town and village has fountains in the main squares and also on the side street, so you will have plenty of options. Let me spend also a couple of words about the tourist cards that you can find in Siena or Florence or Pisa. Personally, I'm not a fan of them because I feel the pressure to go and visit as many museums or destinations included into the ticket. Otherwise, it's not worth actually the cost of the ticket itself. So in my experience, I never save money out of them. But this may be just me. The thing is that in Tuscany, you take life very slow. You know, you go for slow food, a nice breakfast, a cappuccino here, a coffee there. You don't want to be rushed from museum to museum just to make the card worth it. So before you actually buy these cards, make your calculation, see how much does it cost and the museums that you want really to visit. And from there you can understand if it's actually worth the price, or you can just pay for the entrance of a museum that you really want. And in saying that, I'm pretty sure that I forgot other tips that I can give you about saving money, but if you do know other tips as well, just put it into the comment section, because I may do a follow-up video later on in the year. Now, if you're still with me, I guess you appreciated the video and the effort I made to make this video. So subscribe to the channel and like and share the video, because this is gonna help me a ton to increase the exposure of this channel. And with that, I'm gonna close this video. I see you next time with another beautiful video. Ciao!